This podcast is about you. Are you ready? Take a moment and ask yourself, do I know the truth, and do I even care? Well, if you care at all, we have something for you. Stick around. We're a podcast that does not ignore the truth about life, people, or God. Larry Kutzler has been a pastor, a Bible commentator, a radio and podcast producer, and now is your host. This
Pastor
is a
Jack
podcast
is himself
you
an
won't
abortion
forget.
survivor. The most outspoken pro-life pastor in the country, but the fact that you survived a failed abortion attempt just provides so much credibility to your voice, brother.
Well, I tell you what's amazing too, Seth, is the fact that I was in junior high when I found that out.
When you heard them talking about it, yeah.
But I had to mature years later to find out several things. Number one, when I became a Christian, it all began to make sense for me.
Yeah.
Second thing is, having been an abortion survivor, that causes you to have what I believe is a little bit of more boldness toward the call, toward the mission. Because in a sense, yeah, I was already destined to death.
Yeah.
So I've gone through that. I wasn't supposed to live. You know, you mentioned something about my mom, and the real issue was, it was my father who put her through the demand that when he came back from Alaska, that she was not to be pregnant with this child. And so she was the victim. I was a victim. And then, you know, if you think about it, my dad grew up in a non-Christian worldview experience. So it just goes to show you that when God is interjected into the scenario, the healing radically takes place, because the very son that was not supposed to be born wound up leading my mom and my dad to Christ.
That's right.
And so I'll see them later in heaven.
We are bringing a bold statement about Christ. He's our only hope to face the darkness in our day. Thanks for joining us for the City Sites Podcast.
In my opinion, people have the liberty to do to themselves whatever they want. But when their liberty crosses the line over to me, then I have a problem. Anytime your liberty affects me in mind, body, or spirit, then I have a problem. I would go on to say that anytime you use your liberty to harm others, it becomes evil. Evil has always been a bully. It uses liberty to indoctrinate, intimidate, and initiate lies to deceive the world. One of those lies starts in the womb. It's a fetus, they say, not babies. It's tissue, and a woman has the right to her own reproductive health, so she can terminate a pregnancy at any time and for any reason. The lie focuses on the rights of the woman and no one else. However, it's not just about the woman, is it? There's another person affected personally. It's the unborn life that's at stake. The question that is never asked is, what about the unborn life whose life is at stake? Should they have a say in this termination? Of course, the answer to that question in many states is no. I want to talk to a man whose life changed following the termination of his baby, and the change of that direction was for life. And I love this guy. I haven't talked to him for a while, but Brian Walker is the program director at Pro-Life Action Ministries in St. Paul. He and his wife Denise have been involved in the pro-life movement. Brian, how long has it been?
Oh boy, it's been decades. I would say at least 25 minimum.
Wow. Well, you are definitely a veteran. We'll talk more about, where your life is going and how things are moving forward for you and Denise. But I want to talk a little bit about abortion for just a moment. When I talk about it personally, I always pull the God card. It's like I talk about the 56 million babies that are aborted every year globally, worldwide, 63 million babies that have been aborted in the United States since 1973. And I just wonder, Brian, since you've been 25 years in this world of pushing back abortion rights, do you ever pull the God card? And if so, what do you say?
Well, I'm not quite exactly sure what you mean by pull the God card, but I think in our secular society, if you mention anything about the sanctity of life, or God created life, or God is the creation of human beings, that's enough God card for them. And this is what we're seeing now. We're in an anti-natalist world, hatred for children. See this more on the street. with women and men approaching us to say they hate kids. We're bringing children into the world because the world cannot sustain them. We don't want to have children. You shouldn't have children.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have, in a post-Christian nation, I don't call this a Christian nation anymore. We may have had some foundations in Judeo-Christian beliefs, theology, and practice, but that's not here.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're only left with the God card only because politics and kings have failed us, and as they always will. God has proclaimed that in his Bible. All you need to go through is the book of Judges and see how they're raised up, they're raised down, they disappoint, they walk away from God.
Mm-hmm.
We cry for a king, we get the king, and the king disappoints.
Right.
And so we're on that hamster wheel.
Well, we are, and I don't know what else to call it but a God card. I mean, I realize we're in a post-Christian society, but that shouldn't intimidate us to talk about God and how God perceives life and where it begins and all of that. The other thing that sort of stumps me a little bit, Brian, is the fact that, I've had many operations in the last 5 years. I had open heart surgery, I had a couple knee replacements and all of that. And every time the doctor sits in with me and talks about the risks of the surgery he's about or she's about to do. And yet, when we talk about abortion, I watched the State of the Union last night, and the president talked about, he's going to restore the abortion rights nationwide, and the whole gallery just went, yay! And I go, why don't people talk about the after effects of abortion, Brian? There's a lot of psychological, emotional issues that happen. How come nobody talks about that?
That's $1,000 question, maybe $100,000 question.
Yeah,
I watched the State of the Union too, and also I saw the Glee. Mm-hmm. I also saw the video. I'm an ex-New Yorker, and I remember that day that they signed that bill in New York and lit up Trade Center 1 in pink, and the high fives and the glee that we experienced. And the Bible is very clear about that the evil would celebrate these type of things. And so biblically, I'm not surprised why people don't want to talk about post-abortion trauma, healing. One, they've been through it themselves. Mm-hmm. Whenever I talk to people publicly or one-on-one or whatever, I always assume that I'm talking to a person that's post-abortive, and it hurts to look back on something that I believe God has put conscience in everybody. Otherwise, we would have more chaotic society than we have now. But remember when Denise and I drove down to the abortuary, even though we were religious, churched in a way, but not practicing, not Bible believing, we knew what we were doing was wrong. And even though I abdicated my role as a provider and a protector of my soon-to-be wife, we both knew it was wrong. And Denise, when she talks to women, she says, even with Brian's sin and lack of courage and lack of integrity, I still got up on the table, and I had a choice not to do that. And that hurts. Mm-hmm. And when you know that you've killed someone or paid to kill somebody, and even now with things that are coming on us with the abortion pill, soon to be arriving at CVS and Walgreens with a doctor's prescription, which will be very easy to obtain, you're going to have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of more women that will go home and perform a DIY abortion, and they have to live with that as well. Mm-hmm. So just like anything else in our lives that are painful to bring up, I can't think of anything more painful to bring up other than we physically put our hands around somebody's throat and killed them and got away with it than abortion. And it's painful. You feel that you're condemned forever if you come into the saving grace of Jesus Christ. And it's something that is not talked about because I feel that if it was known and talked about more, abortions would go down and it'd be a threat to the industry.
Years ago, Brian, I was interviewing a post-abortive teacher. I mean, they were involved in helping women who were post-abortive on, getting through some of the emotional stumbling blocks and so forth. And I remember her telling me, now this is years ago, she said 1 in 4 Christian women sitting in churches today have had abortion. And I don't know if that's the intimidation why so many pastors and Christian leaders sort of stay away from that abortion. I mean, there are probably many reasons, right? But that's a lot. That's 20 25% of the female population sitting in any given church has had an abortion. So I can see their reluctance on having to, address it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I hear that from pastors a lot when I meet with them one-on-one or speak in a public place. And that is one of the reasons I hear back, well, I oppose supportive women. I know I do in my congregation. My congregation have pro-choicers within it and pro-lifers within it. I have Democrats, Republicans in my congregation. And I just want to bring the gospel and not hurt anybody and not divide the body of Christ. And I get that. But hurts and sin unspoken go unhealed and unchallenged, just like any other sin. And we will go to a meeting and we'll hear about people who have recovered from drugs, recovered from alcohol, adultery, all type of things. And we usually don't ask people to raise their hands in a church service if they've gone through that. For some reason, abortion is never talked about. And the pastors that have talked about it and are known to talk about it, their churches are full. One of the best addresses on abortion I've heard is through Chuck Swindoll, Insight for Living. I think another one was Colin Smith. He's on the radio. He's well known.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Jeffers down there in Texas. And there are examples of Adi Bakum has given a very good exposition on abortion. So there are good examples out there that I feel pastors can run with that are gracious, telling the truth in love, free up women and men from the shame and guilt of it, and then also provide a way of healing and also a way of renewing your mind. Because of those 25% in the pews, I've read a statistic, 42% of them will have another one or have had two or more. And so the mind needs to be renewed. The catharsis of confession and the biblical foundation of confession is theologically and also relationally true with our Lord Jesus Christ. But there has to become a renewing of the mind.
Right.
And that is a painful process. We do that through Rich in Mercy. And through 8 weeks, people have to go through a certain amount of pain. But at the end of 8 weeks, they're free. And it's not a pretty picture to go visit back the time that you paid someone or did it yourself to end a human being. It's painful.
Brian, because our audience may not know you directly, the Rich in Mercy program you talked about is something you and your wife, and I think your wife, Denise, now runs it. Just give us a web address so they can find out more while we're talking about it. What's the web address to that? www.richinmercy.org. It's one word, richinmercy.org. And that's primarily a post-abortive ministry, is that correct?
It's a post-abortive and miscarriage recovery ministry. It's a family ministry because abortion touches not only the woman who has had the abortion or the husband or boyfriend that has been a party to the abortion, but also extended family. We've had, through our groups over the years, we've had grandmothers and grandfathers and aunts and uncles come to either the honor service or been ministered through the curriculum. We've had people that are in ministry. One church, they sent a good amount of their ministers, their co-pastors, assistant pastors, through Rich in Mercy, and some of them hadn't had an abortion and some had not. So it's a powerful course. We've had it up at a well-known addiction recovery ministry in the Twin Cities area. Abortion, very often a trigger into drug abuse, emotional abuse. It's very powerful. So it's a ministry that ministers also to miscarriage because the loss very much similar. The intention or the reason for the loss of life is very different, but the hurt and the loss is the same.
Well, let's shift a little bit of our emphasis here, Brian. Since the Supreme Court has overturned Roe versus Wade, Minnesota has just gone crazy with putting into place not only abortion services for Minnesotans, but it's kind of been an open door, a sanctuary for others in other states who have more restrictive laws. So tell us a little bit what you have seen or are experiencing at the state level.
The Minnesota state level pro-abortion advocates control not only the executive branch, but also the attorney general branch and also the legislative branch. With very slim margins that we lost in the last elections in the midterms. I tell people elections matter, especially Christians. We tend to throw up our hands and say, well, all have fallen short of the glory of God, and all politicians especially. There's a reason to stay home. But I tell folks, if you stay home, the word is very clear. When the righteous rule, the people rejoice. And when the sinners and the fallen have ruled, the people groan. And so votes very much are important. So what we have as a result of that in this state has always been abortion on demand, has always been here since Doe Gomez. And that mandated the funding, public funding for Medicare abortions and Medicaid abortions within our state. So that made abortion legal here. As a result of the latest legislation, abortion up to birth, no matter what they say, there's nothing restricting a person from getting an abortion up to birth in this state. All you need to do is find a medical provider that will perform it. And that's essentially delivering a baby and then having it killed. Also, we no longer require life-saving measures for a child that survives an abortion. They ought to be given comfort care. And this is a care that might be, I'm not trying to be flippant, but it might be just putting a cover over the child as he or she sits on the table and expires. Also, we are promoting our state as a abortion destination state, almost as if you were promoting a vacation. We're not the land of 10,000 lakes anymore. We're the land of abortion mecca, so to speak, and for people encouraged to come here and have their children killed. We will not extradite an abortionist from another state that's broken the law in their state. So this has become a sanctuary state for wayward and law-breaking abortionists to come from other parts of the country. Also, the alternative funds for pregnancy help centers that they've received over the years help women who are deciding to keep their child. Those funds were taken away. They're pretty minuscule compared to our billion-dollar budgets here, but that was taken away as well. We have the abortion pill that is here. CVS and Walgreens have passed all the protocols, all the paperwork. So the abortion pill, which be by prescription, and your big box retailers, and also those independent pharmacies who choose to sell it, that will be available as well. Non-physicians can perform abortions now. And also the abortion recording. Minnesota used to have one of the best reporting requirements of the abortion industry in the whole country. It was very detailed. It was called the Report to the Legislature on Induced Abortions. Came out every year and covered the preceding year. That report has now been gutted, and very little of useful information is left in it. Parental notification no longer required. There always was a time in our state prior to these new laws where a minor could get an abortion. It's called a judicial bypass. And very often you would have a school nurse, social worker, perhaps a family friend. So there are many reasons that abortion is cemented into our culture. And also the last thing is that this Equal Rights Amendment that's trying to come through, they want to codify or put abortion as a constitutional right within the Minnesota Constitution. That has grave consequences for people who are doing pro-life work, possibility of being sued for hate speech, etc. Physicians who refuse to perform abortions potentially can be taken to court because they are violating another person's constitutional rights within Minnesota. And so these are perilous times.
Boy, I'm telling you, that's quite a list, Brian. It really is. I'm really grieved right now to think of our state as being such a bed of evil. It's really incredible. What about the future generations? Do you see any movement? Because, a lot of this stuff is generational, right? Even though abortion has been with us for many generations, from time to time, the next generation rises up, just like in the book of Judges. You saw a new judge rise up that was really godlike and really did wonderful things for the nation of Israel. Are you seeing that younger audiences might be concerned about abortion and may change the wave that we're currently riding?
I think there's a lot of hope for the next generation, and even the generation that will come after them. The internet has been a blessing, and also a curse, but as far as young people, they're getting much of their information via the internet, and to the extent that the pro-life movement can be on the internet, these search engines without hindrance. There's a plethora of information, videos, apologetics, talks, 5-minute videos, courses that one can take to promote the pro-life cause in a form of excellence and also from a biblical worldview. And so as more young people are born, hopefully, and grow up and mature, they have information and access to things that we never had in the beginnings of the pro-life movement. That's back at the mimeograph machines. You and I are old enough to remember that. I remember running one in my school once, snail mail, all those type of things. And so also the young people that are showing up to our events with Pro-Life Action Ministries, our Good Friday service that's coming up very soon on Good Friday. Keep us in prayer. I can't go into the details, but the City Council of St. Paul is trying to put a roadblock to that, and they'll give us some prayers about that will not happen. Pro-life events all around the country, the March for Life. I've spoken at the West Coast March for Life. Busloads of young people that are coming to these events. So we need to be encouraged that even as evil increases and waxes more, the abundance of God's grace will wax more than that. Greater is he who is with us than he who is against us.
Right.
And we have to remember that even if it's just a remnant, Gideon didn't wring his hands over the 300 he was left with. They were very effective. And so even though I believe there are more young people coming to the pro-life cause, it's not a numbers game. It's a game of dedication, perseverance, a biblical worldview. And we find that young people are drawn to that and express a more of a pro-life biblical worldview than we think.
One of the most moving testimonies I've seen in recent years is Jack Hibbs, Pastor Jack Hibbs of Chino Hills Calvary Church in Chino Hills, California. He talks about he was a abortion survivor. In other words, he was born and yet destined to be aborted, and he survived it. And it's very powerful. And of course, he's an advocate for pro-life in his church and in his influence. But Brian, if you were to sit down with a young girl right now and she was contemplating abortion, what do you say to her?
I would say to her that she's not alone. And that's what we teach our sidewalk counselors to do, because we have literally seconds or minutes to give a message of compassion and truth to women and men going into these abortion facilities around the Twin Cities. And the first thing we say to them is what's on the cover of our little brochure we give them is you are not alone and that there's help for you. Women go down to these abortuaries, they feel hemmed in and there's no choice and there's no help. And if you're without help, you're without hope. And we're there to extend the hand of help. The other day, where the sidewalk counselors let this person know that there was help for them, they went in and they came back out and they were given information and instructions and guidance and prayer where to get help to let them know that they can bring this child into this world and raise them and be good fathers and mothers. Our new signage speak to men about how they can be a good father and also how women can be good mothers. And so we need to extend a helping hand, a non-condemning manner. There is help. And I would tell this young lady, there is help, and I'm here to help you. And I may not be able to adopt your child or give you all the money that you need to get through school or pay your tuition. But through our network in the Twin Cities and the greater pro-life movement all around the country, there is help. And look her in the face and say, I think you would make a good mother with all the help that you would need. And that's what I would say to him, and also the husband or the boyfriend as well. And I've been on the street for about 14 years. And those who will take the time to talk to you, once they realize that you care, that you love them, and that you're willing to extend help to them, very often they change their minds.
Well, that's really good news. It really is. Brian, my last question has to do with you addressing leadership, pastors, Christian leaders. What would you say to them? What would you say to them to keep the fight going, to take courage and boldness, to stand up for the unborn? What would you say to them?
I would say to them they need to blow the trumpet in Zion and have them realize that even though abortion is a difficult issue, they are going to bless their congregations. We do an exit interview with the women and men that go through our program, and all of them, without a fail, have said, I wish my pastor had preached on this. I wish my pastor had taught on this. And that's not to excuse the individual behavior of our attendees who went through their abortion. We're not laying this at the feet of the pastor, but at the feet of the pastor is their responsibility before God. They're supposed to be the under shepherd of their church. And if they withhold life-giving information and the gospel of not only the gospel of Jesus Christ, but the gospel of life, they are responsible. The blood of their congregation is literally on their hands, and they need to repent. And so for pastors, there's help also. Denise and I are here with the Rich and Mercy to work with pastors. We've talked to pastors. We have a separate pastoral track through our program that is highly confidential, that is usually one-on-one. They've had their abortion in seminary, or they've had their abortions while they're in ministry. They might have sent their daughter down to an abortion facility, probably in another city or another state, because if a pastor's kid comes up aborted or pregnant, what's the congregation going to think? Will he lose his ministry or lose her ministry? They are under tremendous pressure, basically from the devil, because he's a father of lies. And we need to see this on the spiritual plane. It's not political to speak about abortion to your congregation. And it's imperative because things are getting darker. And with the abortion pill, you can have young ladies go to the CVS, go to Walgreens, and abort their children at home, or a hotel, or a friend's house. And at home, their bathroom becomes a mausoleum. And what is the impact of that person who's been going to church and ministry, and all of a sudden they stop coming? All of a sudden they start to draw back. All of a sudden their countenance starts to drop. What is happening to them? And pastors need to consider that if they don't speak about abortion in compassionate and truthful ways, this person will suffer the torment of it, possibly for the rest of their lives.
You travel throughout the state and probably the country, but in the state of Minnesota, you'll go into central Minnesota, like where we're at, or up in Duluth. So you travel to churches, you have seminars, you talk in church services and so forth. How do they get a hold of you?
The best way to get a hold of us through the website is www.richandmercy.org. And there is a message or chat box in there, text box, and you send us a message to the ministry. That's probably the best thing and quickest way to get a hold of us. In fact, we have a group going up in Duluth as we speak. And so we've been up to Duluth for a number of years. We've spoken up there on the Iron Range, and we would go anywhere. Just contact us there. Pastors want to have us speak to their congregation and or have a Rich and Mercy group be trained. We train our facilitators. We train them well. We train them with a Christian worldview. We're ready to go.
Brian Walker, thank you so much, and I hope to come back to you again talking some more about some of the ramifications and some of the hope that we have when we insert Christ into our hearts and minds and our message. Again, thank you.
Will do. Thank you, my friend. God bless.
This isn't the end. It's only the beginning of your journey to trust God for the truth you never want to lose. We can help. Log on to citysightsurbanmedia.com today. Remember, there's only one truth and only one God, and you should know them both.